Controversy over racial climate at Boston Latin has prompted new debate over the pathway to the city's exam schools. There's been a range of ideas, from changes in recruitment and preparation to new kinds of set-asides or even limits. Among those with some ideas are tonight's guests, the Education Project Director from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice, Matt Cregor, and the pastor of Pleasant Hill Missionary Baptist Church, Reverend Miniard Culpepper. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
I want to start, Reverend Culpepper, you know, most of what we've been following in the news from Latin has been about racial climate and the way things are run in the school, but why revisit the pipeline about getting it into school?
Well, if you look at the history of Boston Latin, 20 years ago, there was almost 25% black students at Boston Latin. I think it was 23%. And if you look at today, there are 9% black students at Boston Latin and 12% Hispanic students at Boston Latin. And so over the years, the numbers have consistently dwindled. And I think the more the numbers decrease, the more the atmosphere changes from a more positive, diverse one to one where it becomes alienated, and the few students that are there find themselves in a more hostile environment. And so I think the more diverse, it seemed like the more productive Latin was overall as a school. And so I think there needs to be different initiatives to bring the levels back to the time when they had 23% 20 years ago. It's amazing that over 20 years the number just kept dwindling. Even with the court case and the consent decree, the numbers continue to dwindle. And so I think now that we find ourselves in this predicament, in this situation where we have an opportunity to make some initiatives, make some strides to increase the number, to make Latin more diverse, not just for the students, but I think also for the leadership there. I think that has a big thing to do with how positive the environment is for all of the students. I think the faculty is also an issue. I think the numbers are dismal at Latin when you look at the number of faculty. So I think it's across the board. It's not just the number of students. I don't think you can just increase the number of students without increasing the number of teachers and without increasing the high-level leadership at the Boston Latin School.
Well, Cregor, I mean, certainly part of the solution could be that you prepare students better, you target black students maybe for preparation, you have more access to advanced work classes.
Sure.
Why wouldn't that be enough to do the fix?
I think as a city, this is the appropriate time to examine all of it, to get a full sense of what's available to us that's going to make us reach a critical mass of underrepresented minority students in our exam schools. The Supreme Court has only made things clearer for us as a city and as a country when it comes to how do we promote diversity? How do we reduce racial isolation? And so it's a chance to say, you know, are there prep programs that are going to matter? Are there pipelines like advanced work that should be expanded, should be changed? And what are the things that we can look at when we determine who gets into this school that can help make sure that our top students from all over the city are represented in, you know, in the first public school in America?
Reverend, I think one thing that you're probably going to hear again from people, if there is, even if we have supposedly race-neutral set-asides, there'll be some people say, well, you know, my son or daughter got a higher score than somebody else who got in, and my son or daughter didn't get in, and they don't think that's fair.
You know, I think part of, and it's interesting, the notion of scores, higher scores, lower scores, because I think there are some students that are prepared from day one, that their parents are working. And I remember as a child, even though I was born in Boston, we grew up in Los Angeles. And I remember my mother, she kept saying, you know, we're going to move back to Boston and you're going to Latin school. I mean, even in Los Angeles public schools, my mother was preaching to me as a young child that I was going to go to Latin school. I had no idea what Boston Latin School was. But I think the move that they made back to Boston in the 8th grade was just in time for me to take the Boston Latin School exam. And for me, and at that time, the exam came up, and I must say that that was a day that we took off from school. I didn't even take the exam. But my mother, and the mindset from being a young child was that I was being prepared for Boston Latin. I think that's what happens with many parents who have already decided they're going to prepare their students from a very young age for Boston Latin, where you have students that are in a much difficult and challenged situation who are trying to catch up. And sometimes when you're behind, there's a national reading program. Sometimes when you're behind at a younger age, sometimes you never catch up. And so I think there has to be some balances. You may never catch up on the scores, but I think there are other positive attributes that you bring to help round out Boston Latin. Isn't it amazing if all of the students at Boston Latin were just white students, what kind of school that would be? I think there has to be a balance. And I think one of the things the Supreme Court said, and I think it's interesting that the Supreme Court was talking about the university and in Texas, was that there is a way to balance out the students so you don't have one set of students representing one set of society.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Reverend Miniard Culpepper of Mount Pleasant Missionary Baptist Church and Matt Cregor of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. Matt, talk about the quality at the school, because as Reverend mentioned, that there was a time when there were set-asides, and
I'm not sure if I'd call them set-asides now, because I'm not sure if I'd call them set-asides. I think there were different initiatives and different programs to prepare the students better than they're being prepared today. So I'm not sure if they were set-asides.
I mean, before the court decision, and yet at the same time, I mean, there was still quality at the school from that. I mean,
So what we know, less from looking at individual report cards, more from hearing stories from teachers, administrators, and alumni of the school, is that whether you looked in the 70s, the 90s, or now, there are and there always have been Black and Latino students thriving at Latin along with white and Asian students. The only thing that has changed since the 90s has been how we determine who gets into the school. Right? And our fear is that we know we are one of the most diverse cities in the country, and we know we are at our best when our top students are being prepared together to learn with and from each other to become the leaders of tomorrow that this city needs. And it's going to be incumbent upon us to figure out what are the ways we're going to make sure all of our children are interacting in a way that can boost us together as a city. And to us, making Latin a part of that is an important piece.
Finally, Reverend, another item in our news lineup tonight about the shootings. This has been a terrible week between the police shootings and the officers killed in Dallas, and you're having a vigil touching on this.
Yes, tonight we're having a vigil at the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church at 7 p.m. By the way, there was a press conference at 1 o'clock at the 12th Baptist Church. But one of the things that we really wanted to do is to focus on prayer, because I think where we are as a country, where we are as a state and a city, whatever happens in Dallas has an impact on what happens here. Whatever happens in New Orleans, it has an impact on what happened here. Whatever happened in Minnesota has an impact on what happens here. And we think at this point, the faith leaders, that the focus on prayer will help the country look at some of the issues that we're really grappling with as a nation, because we're really at odds from a race perspective, not just at Boston Latin, not just in Boston as a whole, but even as a nation. When you look at the president and you look at the Congress and you look at some of the attacks that the president has experienced based on being an African American president. So when you look at it from a more general lens, and you look at it from not just a Boston perspective or not just a state perspective, but it's a national issue. And I think it's important for us, in the midst of all of this chaos, in the midst of all of the tragedy, to pray for all of the families of those who have lost loved ones in New Orleans, Minnesota, and in Dallas. I think prayer is essential now. So we're calling everyone into prayer.
And the exact time and place, Reverend?
7 p.m., 155 Humboldt Ave, Dorchester, Mass. Dorchester, Mass. will probably be outside of the church. If it rains, we'll be inside the church. But we're calling the city this day and the nation into prayer like other churches and other cities have.
Thank you both very much, Reverend Miniard Culpepper and Matt Cregor.